welcome back Ben Niles first.
Oh my. Thank you. Thank you.
So I asked them backstage if it was okay if I just welcomed them as the 5 Browns, or if they wanted me to get the names, because I was worried I was going to blow it. I don't think I will, but I'll just introduce them as the 5 Browns. Welcome, you guys. Ben is still filming.
Yes. That's right, the DVD extras.
That's right. Okay, I'm going to ask a few questions first. I'll get the ball rolling. I imagine some of you have questions. Can I underline that word, questions? This is a Q&A, so I know some of you may have statements you want to make, but let's hold that off for another night. Ask a question. That ends with a question mark. It's generally how it works. My job is to moderate this, so I will make sure it works that way. But remember, we don't have a ton of time, and there are a lot of people who want to also ask a question. So let's keep that in mind. Does that make sense? Okay. One of the things that I was talking to with Ben on the radio program, and I want to talk to you again about this, and then get your perspective from the Browns, and that is the question of whether or not because you talked about feeling conflicted about whether it was even right to make a film like this, like whether it was truly necessary to reveal this story, what was it going to accomplish? They had reluctance, obviously, along the way. They've been through this story. Would you just talk a little bit about that? And then I want to hear from you about that. Like when the idea of, oh, you're going to have to tell this story, or somebody wants to talk to you about this story, like how you felt about that.
Right. So I knew the backstory of the 5 Browns. I knew about the abuse. And I knew that they had, 3 #1 records. I knew that there were a lot of interesting things there from a filmmaking point of view. But I wasn't sure there was anything there. And, well, they understand where I'm coming from. But in the present, I didn't know them. I didn't know what they were doing today. And so don't judge a book by its cover. I really didn't know what was going on in their world. And so I thought, what good is it going to do me to try to tell a rehashing of this, just kind of for myself, for the drama? And what good would it do them? But then, as you do, right, you start to dig a little and do your research, and it became clear to me very quickly that this advocacy work they were doing was very compelling and very important, a story that I thought needed to be out there. I didn't know anything about statute of limitation laws. So that in itself felt like a story that should be told. But then this idea of the little tin box just really took it over the top for me, because it was a musical reflection of their childhood. So I thought, well, there's the advocacy work and the music, and that felt like a good fit.
All right, I guess we're gonna have to share that, Mike. Here's another one.
Yeah.
talk a little bit about your reaction to it, and did you call each other on the phone and say, this is a terrible idea, let's not do this? Or how did
I'll start off.
Yeah.
I mean, I think all of us have a difference of opinion on this, but I remember... I'm going to be honest, don't worry. Soon after meeting Ben, he brought up the idea of maybe working together and doing a film. And my immediate reaction was, oh no, I'm worried. Because when you think of somebody wanting to make a film about your life, you're thinking, oh, it's going to get really personal. We don't know this guy very well. And it's something that, how do you put trust into somebody that you don't really know and you don't know what they have in mind to create? And so that's why my initial worry was there. But as we got to talking with Ben, to knowing what his vision was, we shared a very similar vision of what we thought would work in a film, and I think he did a beautiful job.
Initially, I was, as you can kind of see and guess, I was very apprehensive about the idea. But I also knew that every time we went out and played a concert or went on tour and we were doing an interview at some different state in some different area, that it was always the elephant in the room that was always awkward. And so I was just finally kind of done with that, and I wanted to be able, maybe if we just did this project, maybe people would just stop asking and we could just refer them to the documentary and it would be all be over.
That's why she's sitting up here right now.
Exactly.
I know. I look back at my words and I'm like, the only reason I'm doing this documentary with you is because I don't want to talk about it anymore, and here I am talking about it
I know.
some more.
I'm going to come back to that, by the way, because that is interesting, and I wonder if you actually thought that was realistic, that, like, all right, I'm saying this once, and see you later, and that's obviously not the way it worked, I guess.
Yeah, but it is nice that there are 5 of us, because we all share the load, and if there is a question that makes somebody uncomfortable, one of the rest of us can take it. So we kind of figure that if she's ever comes up against a question she's not comfortable with, we'll have someone else.
How much of this do you owe to the public, this story? And how much of this did you talk amongst yourselves, like, this is our thing. This is our privacy. This happened to us. We play the piano for people. We're artists. We don't owe them this story.
Right. I mean, given the work that Deandra and I were doing, we thought maybe sharing our story would help other survivors maybe, feel less shame. Because shame is one of the biggest hurdles that survivors come up against, and it's what keeps them quiet often. So, and then in our discussions, trying to decide whether to make this film, we decided, well, if we're going to move ahead, then we need to be truly honest. So it doesn't take anything away from the difficult experiences that other survivors experience. So in that way, we did feel that we owed it to other survivors because we are trying to help this situation, the problem, this scourge that afflicts everybody in this room knows somebody, given the statistics, whether you know it or not. So that was a big reason.
What about, you guys are so good at this, you're practiced, like, and you take it, and then I'll... Who else? Anyone else want to say? Gregory, I'd like to hear from you.
I guess the short answer is no. I don't feel like we felt like we... Well, I don't feel like I felt like... I don't feel like I thought we owed it to the public to talk about it. This honestly, right? Because... there are already avenues where we have the ability to do that, like through the foundation, which has done really great work. And generally speaking, in the years between when the abuse came out and today, we've tried to sort of keep a little bit of a line in the sand between what's the 5 Browns and what's the abuse story, right? What's the stuff that the foundation is working on.
Wait, what's the difference?
What is the difference?
Yeah, well, like the 5 Browns were about music, this is what we do, and then that we set that thing aside for a...
That's exactly right. So it's about the music. Yep. It's about being able to play that music for people and let them enjoy that without the story inside of it, right?
Yeah.
And we talked a lot about it because we were all apprehensive to some degree or another, and we just felt like the time was sort of right for it. We felt like the man was sort of right for it. Like we had seen, if any of you have seen any of Ben's previous work, like Note by Note, The Making of a Steinway Piano, it's a really great film. We had all seen that, and we know how great of a filmmaker he is, and that really helped.
Did it help also that he thought an important part of the story was the music?
I think that was a big concern early on, was that anything salacious or from our personal lives was going to completely monopolize the entire story. But I love that what ties it all together and the bigger picture, in a sense, is the music and our relationships, and he really seemed to understand that.
How long did it take, and Ben, I want to hear you on this too, for you to trust him, though? And what were those first conversations like? I think, Ben, you've talked about the first conversations with Melody, for example. Like, she was kind of holding back and wasn't exactly sure yet. Talk about that. Ben, you start.
Well, Melody and I have a special relationship. I remember when I felt like they were trusting me was when I got an email saying, this is about 6 months in.
Wow.
Should we sign a contract? Like, should your people send us a contract? And, yeah. So, like, for 6 months, I mean, like, at any moment, they could have called and said, sorry, this is over, So there was a risk involved on my part, too, but not nearly as big a risk as what they were. But I felt like, well, maybe they'll just see that or sense that I'm not really saying sign this, and I was feeding them clips and stuff like that. And then I think when they felt comfortable, they said, should we formalize this?
It's funny, like, my perspective, I watched back the film, and this is only really my second time watching it back in full. But I'm like, gosh, I was like just so sad through the whole thing. And it's really because I told Ben, I was like, it's like you're the Grim Reaper. Like, just every time I see you, like, I have to, like, relive this horrible thing. So poor Ben, like, anytime I interviewed with him, I was like, oh, great. Okay, let's do this.
The Ben Reaper.
Okay, how much are you willing to talk about now regarding your parents? I'll let you be the guides for that. I want to start with a story, and we can not talk about it if we don't need to, but the car story. The question I had, and I think it still remains, and still others may have, is whether or not your father is still trying to control this story in some way. That scene with your mom and when he calls from the prison is so weird. It's just it's so strange, and all due respect to your mother, that is so strange, the way she's showing it's just very odd, and I wanted to get your sense of the reaction to that, and that the car story is so strange, and whether that was intentional, and is there a control? I don't even know how much you want to talk about that, but I'll just leave it there. What do you think?
Sure. Yes, it is very, very strange. I guess the short answer to that is I don't really know sort of where they are right now in life. I don't really know, what they're thinking, how they're feeling. We don't have a lot of communication. There, I think, are some important things, some really important things that would have to be said or done before a conversation even starts to begin. So I guess my answer is that I don't really have an answer for you, other than that I hope they're okay, and what you saw on screen felt true, accurate to me. Yeah.
What about the rest of you? Whoever wants to.
Yeah, I didn't think that Ben took anything out of context with what you saw there. I felt like that was my mom on camera. And, it's just how it is right now. So, yeah.
And it's a testament to Ben. We originally told him that we didn't want him to interview our mother or interview our father. We put that on the table, and he was very respectful. And then as we got further in, he raised the question with us that it may be important to the narrative for people to at least understand that portion, whatever he could get out of an interview. But he could still left it up to us. So we talked about it and thought about it, and eventually wanted to make sure that he could tell the story that needed to be told, and we gave him creative license to do what he felt needed to be done. It was still scary. I mean, when he came in town to interview her, we all knew it was happening, and it was a difficult moment, but we figured our lives have gone in such a direction that her life is hers, and we'll continue to do what we do.
What did your father mean when he said, "You have nothing to do with my repentance process"?
I think a lot of abusers minimize or deny what they've done, and like a serious state of denial, right? So he didn't want somebody telling him, the state of his life, right? Or telling him how bad what he had done was. So he really I think this happens a lot, and it was no different in our family. They just wanted it to go away. Everybody's tired of talking about it. Everybody's tired of dealing with it.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make it go away.
I think it can be, as someone who has not been abused myself, before kind of going through this experience, kind of dealing with the aftermath of it with my sisters, I had no idea how painful the lifelong effects can be. And I think it's important that, not only my father, but all of us understand that, whoever's in our life that has suffered something like this, it's not just going to go away, right? Yeah. Like Desi said in the film, there are some things that maybe never will heal, but we try our best. We pick ourselves up and we try our best.
I think also at that point when he told me that about 6 or 7 months had gone by, and he thought that was enough, and that we should be ready to move on. And I mean, this is a lifetime of hurt, so it's going to take a lifetime of healing.
Did you learn any lessons about the way faith or religion can mask or hide or make this difficult or make it even easier? I mean, I'm guessing your mother has a certain sort of religious perspective about all of this and believes in repentance, and why can't you guys move on if he's made things right with God or whatever? I'm just wondering, did you learn any lessons about that, having come from a faithful family?
Yeah, I mean, again, I sort of have to come back to what I said before, is that I don't really know, right? I'm not in their mind. I'm not in their heart. All I can speak from is my own experience, and I don't understand what it would take to be coming from their experience, from their perspective, right? I don't understand that. So I can't really speak to it. Sorry.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, it doesn't, that kind of thinking doesn't really make sense to me. From the way I see it is if you directly affected somebody, you have to try to work things out with them. It's not something that's just between you and God. It's a lot deeper than that.
Let me invite those of you here who have questions to join us. Yes, go ahead. It'll be on. Go ahead.
It will be on.
There you go.
It is on. Okay. You have been betrayed by your father. And when this came to light in your family and you approached your parents, how did you somehow deal with the fact that your mother was supporting him in whatever way she was? That was my interpretation, that she was supporting him and is still with him and seemingly still supports him.
I think it was a process. I think originally you have that hope that you'll get that support, but after trying and attempting and trying anything that you can think of to salvage that relationship and then some, eventually you realize that that is at the expense of yourself. And eventually you realize that that's harming you and that you have to take care of yourself. And sometimes we feel like it's selfish to focus on ourselves. And I can honestly say, as someone who's lived through terrible things, as many of us do, sometimes you have to be selfish and take care of yourself and watch out for your own little family and heal first before you can then focus on anything else. And I think that's what each one of us needed to do.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you. I wondered how... I'm wondering, Melody, at all, if you, and I'm not sure if you're willing to share this, but do you feel differently now? You talked about being reticent and reluctant of being engaged in the activism that your sisters were. Has that changed at all, or do you still feel that sense of discomfort about all of that?
It hasn't changed, no. I feel like somehow they've been given some crazy gift that they can just go out and somehow not be affected by this. And it's like they have some sort of superpower, and I don't have that. My superpower, I guess, is in other stuff. I hope I have a superpower.
You kind of do. You kind of all do, yeah. The piano's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I'd rather focus in on the music and creation and just different aspects of life that bring beauty and joy to my life, whereas for Deandra and Desiree, this does bring beauty and joy to their life.
Yeah.
In watching the film, I realized selfishly, like from a filmmaking point of view, that it's a better film, right? That Melody's not an advocate.
Totally. Yeah, it worked out for you really well.
Is that my secret superpower?
Right? I mean, it really worked out for me. No, but seriously,
really angry about
I've been wanting to do that. No, but seriously, no. The beauty of it is when we've screened this before and other survivors have come up, and especially that last screening in Montclair, I felt like they were really appreciative of Melody. They were appreciative of all of them, but like Desiree says in the film, everybody heals differently.
Yep.
And so it's more of a balance, right? To see how one or two people might handle things and how another person might handle things. So hopefully when people see the film, especially other survivors, they'll be able to connect with either or, There's no right or wrong.
Yeah.
The funny thing is that even as close as we are as brothers and sisters, it was really moving to see the one-on-one interviews that Ben had with each of us. Because you don't sit there as siblings and just, pour your inner thoughts out to each other. I mean, there's moments of it, but you never really hear what your sibling feels or thinks about you. So I was really proud of each one of them for being honest and being real. And I was really proud to watch the fact that we've gone through a lot and we still are happy. We still love each other. We're still going to keep performing, and that's never going to change.
I wonder, that's a good thing. How is this, how is the momentum of this Me Too movement affecting all of this now in your sense of activism? Desiree, maybe you on that point, because you're part of such a wave now.
Yeah, it's actually been a relief, because we know in talking with legislators that awareness is so important, and there really does need to be a public outcry for change to happen. And the Me Too movement, all of a sudden, everybody's, so many people are speaking up, And like I said earlier, it takes the shame away. There's a discussion to be had. And because a lot of what we do when we sit down and meet with politicians is just educating them on the issue. And now we walk into a room and there's a certain amount that can be understood now, and that it needs to be talked about, that it's urgent. So it's very helpful.
But children aren't going to stand up for themselves. So that's our responsibility to make sure that the next generations coming up are not only empowered to protect themselves, but also are supported, even more so supported by adults who they can trust, and of course supported by the laws of the land. So we feel like if children can't speak for themselves, we need to do that for them.
It was interesting to see, and with all due respect to Senator Lyle Hilliard at that hearing in the state legislature, that was another interesting sort of insight that somehow patting someone on the butt constitutes abuse, or his thinking about that. Do you want to say anything about, I guess you said we need to educate lawmakers. I guess that's kind of what you were talking about. But does that kind of idea, is it still out there?
You know, I have had amazing experiences working up at the Capitol. Not only have I felt understood and heard, I've felt like what I have to say has meaning. And I think that's a testament to the legislators that we have here in this state. I can promise you, in the work that I've done outside of the state, we have a wonderful system here of people who will work tirelessly to protect kids and will continue to reevaluate and make sure that the laws are where they are. And I've formed some wonderful relationships along the way of legislators who I know will continue to fight for children. And it's empowering to me to go to a state like New York and to see the inner workings of what's going on out there, and to tell them Utah has much better laws than you guys do. And for them to look at me and be like, that can't be possible. And I am proud to say that we continue, because of Representative Romero, because of Senator Weiler, and so many others, to reevaluate and to make it one of the stronger states in the country. And I'm proud to be from here.
Don't get her started. Yeah. All right. Yes. Welcome.
Thank you. I have kind of a two-part question for Ben, and it goes back to the interview with Lisa. And I guess the first part would be, did she know what you were there to interview her about? Did she know the story you were there to tell? And then the other part would be just more personal for you. When she kind of goes off on the tell them about the Porsche and nobody taught me how to write a check, how did you feel? You know, was she being defensive or just deflecting? And what was it like being in that room?
Yes, she did fully understand what the interview was about. In fact, the interview had been canceled once because we had been tiptoeing around it via email and a few phone conversations. She was really excited about the idea that her kids were gonna, have this film made about them. But I could tell that she was always saying, there was so much positive stuff. And then finally, she said, "Are you gonna ask me questions about my husband's incarceration?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Well, I don't want to talk about that." And so I said, "Well, I don't think we can do the interview." But several months went by, and so many people were asking me, when I would tell them at a friend or whatever that I'm working on this film, everyone would say, "Well, what about the mom? What about the mom? What about the mom?" Everybody wanted to know about the mother. And so that's when I went back to these guys and said, even though I don't like that she is setting the parameters, I'm not allowed to ask questions about this. My feeling is that her inability or unwillingness to discuss it is just gonna be amplified because she won't discuss it. And so
that totally came through, I think.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah.
I mean, it's apparent,
and I'd never met her. You know, I didn't know what she was going to be like. But I'm glad I went through with it. I'm not sure I would always recommend that, like for filmmakers. Like certainly, I'm not used to like sharing questions with people ahead of time, stuff like that. But yeah, I guess from the filmmaking point of view, it did work out.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello. Hey, guys. I actually wanted to first say you guys are amazing. Second of all, I have sort of a nuanced question for you, Melody. It's totally cool if you don't want to answer anything, but I don't know why it caught my attention when you mentioned when you're around your nieces and nephew, like you feel like in some way you're hurting them. I don't know why that resonated with me. I think because thinking that these things happen to children is very heartbreaking, and I sort of wanted to get an understanding of what you meant by that, if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, no, in the part of the film, you might not have heard the very first part of that sentence. I was talking about how I had a pretty bad nightmare that I was hurting my nieces, and that it was a wake-up call when I woke up, literally, to realize how much of a different person it takes to do that to a child. So I don't know why that dream was planted in my mind, but it stuck with me and made me realize that it really does take somebody really interesting to do that.
Thank you. Yes.
Desi. So what helped, Desi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
What helped you get to a place where you felt safe and free enough to even ask your sisters the question or get from that, knowing the control that was put into the home all those years? At some point in time, you know, where did you get to that point? How is the most important thing, I think, did you get to that point?
Yeah, hey, good question. And I think that's the answer to your question is part of why it takes survivors so long to come forward and start speaking about it. It's because, often victims are financially dependent on their parents, or in our case, our dad, who was the abuser. So I needed to have distance from that. I needed to create a support system away from my parents. So I got married. I had other friends and my siblings. So I had gotten to a place where I was safe enough to start to look around and be like, this is not a good man. I started to see how he was treating people. It's one thing, and that's part of what made our reconciliation with him fail, is that he would say one thing, but his actions were far more telling than the words coming out of his mouth. And he started to become pretty cruel. And so that's what made me start to wonder, what is going on here? Because here's this person who acts like he's righteous, but I see him treating people cruelly. And I knew for myself what had happened in my past, and I started to wonder. And so that's the progression of events. It's how it kind of started. That's what led me to ask the questions.
It's something on top of that, because it just reminded me when my father told me for the first time with everybody there about the abuse, and I'd mentioned my reaction in the film. And how I felt like I was going to throw up, and just because of all the emotions, and I was shaking. And as time went on, it was so difficult to know how to support my sisters in this, because obviously I believed them, and I wanted to show that the best I could, but it's so difficult because you're thinking I didn't go through that. How can I possibly put myself in those shoes to help support them? And I feel like that's one of the hardest things for people that are looking on the outside, that know people that have been abused, to know how to handle or to support them. And honestly, I think I would probably do things a bit differently. I would be more loving. I feel like there was too much thought in the process when I could just be there for them, just listen to them and just hug them and be with them, because they're such great people, and it's a process in your mind. But I love these guys so much, and I wish that I could have handled things better. But I'm grateful for where we are now, and giving them all the support I can.
Go ahead.
Having been a backyard neighbor in Alpine to these absolutely incredible people, I want to say thank you for having the courage to share what you've shared. And I want to say, listening to you when you were very young, 5 pianos in your family, 5 pianos in your home, and you playing for 8, 7, 6 hours a day, and we could hear how incredible you were. What could we as neighbors have done to help you?
As a parent now, I get asked this question in different forms all the time. As parents, what can I be looking for? As neighbors, what can I be doing? And I think one of the biggest things that you can do is educate yourself on what to watch for and be involved in the lives of the kids around you and open your eyes. Sometimes, we don't want to see something that's difficult. And it's easy to turn a blind eye and be like, oh, I'm sure it's fine. We don't always know that. And it's important for communities to be invested in the children and not, just expect that everything is going to be okay. It's important for all of us to make sure that if we suspect something is off, then don't just turn a blind eye and hope that it will go away.
And I have to say, Desi, you were in our home a lot. I have to say I didn't ever think there was anything off, except the fact, how do young children play 6 and 7 hours a day? And that's led you into this incredible career, but and the homeschooling, where you were very, very isolated. Should we have said, Desi, is everything okay?
I was going to add on to what Deandra said. Direct questions. Because we were kids, it's tough to know because not every kid will disclose. And I don't know if I would have if somebody had asked me. But dancing around it, or if you suspect something, you could just ask straight a direct question that it's hard to say, like yes or no. You have to. I should say, ask a yes or no question. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And and if somebody had asked directly, I don't know what would have happened. I don't know if it would have been different.
We love you, and you are our heroes, all of you. It's incredible to see how you've all stayed together.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mine's a little bit more sentimental about the music. I talked to Melody once about Matryoshkas, and it was just in context of some small conversation we had. I'd just gone to the Utah Symphony. For me, as a choir boy, piano and melody was very cleansing for me, and so over time, these things, I can't remember if it was Greg or Ryan that played the Schumann, and then also the Couperin was beautiful too. How these things can truly reach you deeply. There's music therapy programs all over the nation. What are your feelings on that? I know it must have been a treat to score these. To have that be a part of this. This is all about music, but how cleansing are these things? You've been playing this stuff, had a classical upbringing. How powerful is that? And whatever you want to share.
I mean, that's definitely an area we haven't really explored a lot with children and the healing of music, and we hope to do things like that more. But I can tell you right off once, you show a little bit in the film about when the press hit after my parents' accident, and we were kind of being hounded by the press, and I didn't want to go near the piano because it was all part of that. It was all wrapped in that whole crazy mess, and finally, I heard, it was even on an advertisement that was just playing on the TV, and it was the Bach's First Prelude for the piano. And I had this moment, I was like, I should just learn that, just learn it, just because. And I started learning it, and I just started playing it, and I was purging just so much through the music. And where I would finish, and I didn't even know where I was in the music because I was just crying my eyes out. And music's powerful. It can do a lot of stuff. Deandra talks about it in the film, and does he too, how it somehow kind of heals a little bit of that motherboard. But it is super powerful, and thanks for acknowledging that.
Yes.
Thank you very much for sharing your story, and it's nice to see you. I was struck by Ryan's comments in the film about his practicing with his mom, and it made me really sad, and I am wondering if you also feel a victim of abuse. Ryan, if you feel comfortable.
What was that last part that you said?
If you feel a victim of abuse due to the practices.
So this was kind of a tricky part in the film for me because I knew that I was a week before Ben was saying that he was scheduling a time for us to talk, and I had a feeling that this might come up, and so I told him. Up front, I said, if you think that this is going to take away from the point of the film, cut this part out, because I'm not sure if it's necessary, because what I went through with my mom with practicing was bad, but it doesn't even compare to what my sisters had, and so, that's how I view it.
Can I just cut in though? What's bad is bad. There are varying degrees, and I always tell people that you can't compare. You can't compare the awful things that happen in your lives. But the fact that you lived through these things, yeah, it's different from what we lived through, but it's still there. Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. If you have a question, stand by the mic. I'm not quite sure. Go. Yes.
So speaking towards prevention, you're in his interview, or he made a statement where I guess he kind of took the role of sex education and obviously used that as a way to his abuse. Now, as parents, how do you use the role of sex education in teaching your kids, what is correct because it's kind of a taboo here. Growing up in Utah, a lot of us don't really have those conversations with our parents of what is okay, what to watch out for. So how have you guys taken on that role now?
I have a 7-year-old, and my husband and I, we obviously want to make sure that she's protected as much as possible, right? But we also realize she's 7. So we make sure that our discussions with her are very calm and very, that we're open and honest with her, but at a level that she can understand. And I think as she continues to grow, that will continue to evolve. There are so many important topics that are associated with sexual abuse prevention versus sex ed. I want to make sure that in her mind, the two are completely separate. That's important to me as a parent, that they never are construed as one. And I want my husband and I to be able to be invested in either of those conversations with her. I'm very supportive of these discussions being introduced and had in different environments, whether it's the school or whether it's community events, because I feel like that gives us a better foundation to address these important aspects of being a human being with her, and that will continue to grow. I don't know, ask me in another 10 years when I have a teenager. I'm sure that it will change, but I would hope that the honesty and the openness that we're establishing at this point in her life will continue all the way through.
Well, and let me just add, Deandra helped usher through a bill in the Utah legislature with Representative Romero, who is here. A bill that allowed sex abuse prevention to be taught in the schools. And Deandra was actually asked to be on the board with educators to choose the curriculum to be introduced in the schools. So there's one way.
Thank you.
Thanks. So we're running out of time, but we'll get to as many as we can. Yes. Oh, there you are. Oh, somebody popped up. Oh.
I feel so much love for each of you individually, collectively, and I feel so much love from you. I have so many emotions, I don't really know where to start. I know this is supposed to be questions, not statements. But as a fellow pianist, like, your music has always meant the world to me ever since 2005 when the first album came out. And I think I could talk for hours with you guys, but I think what was on my mind during the film is it was kind of a mix of what happened with Ryan and also what happened with the sisters. I attended Utah State University, and this spring, some news came out about a lot of problems in that department, sexually and also just psychological abuse. And I studied 9 years with Gary Amano, who is kind of the head of this program that just recently is burned down to the ground. They're kind of rebuilding, and a lot of stories came up about sexual abuse within the department. These are like college-age students, not just children. And I think I felt kind of powerless because I didn't experience maybe some of the abuse, but I saw it happening and I didn't know what to do. And I remember I only lasted 1 year in the program. I was with the teacher 8 years before college, but I saw it and I hated it. And so I left after a year, but there's been a lot of psychological damage done as I've pursued a career as a pianist in the last 7 years. And I kind of crashed for a couple days after this news came out because I had to dig through the darkness. And I guess my question is, I have a big question and a small question. The big question is, how do you pace yourself with healing? I feel like I'm still kind of frozen and I want to share my story, but I also don't want to draw attention to myself or minimize the stories of mainly the women that have come forward. And then the other small question is, are we allowed to know when the new album comes out? As a fan, I wanted to ask that question.
I'll take start off on the first one. Going back to what happened with my mother, obviously it shouldn't have escalated to that level. When a child is not wanting to practice at the piano, and it's going into the late hours, obviously things are going to struggle with your mind, it's not going to happen, and it should just never get to that point where abuse happens. And for me, it did cause some damage growing up, and it caused me to not like music as much through my early teenage years because of memories of not wanting to practice because of how hard it was, and what would happen to me. And so it's important to try, if you're a teacher, if you're an educator, that it should never get to that level. You should try different ways. If somebody's not getting it, it's because you're not explaining it correctly enough. Try again. Try it a different way. And I don't think my mom did that. I don't think that she went down different routes to try to inspire me to practice and to love music in the way that I could have during those days.
And when it comes to the sort of systemic sexual abuse problem that is being talked about so much right now, we're living in a really painful time, right? I think you're feeling that, particularly because it happened in your institution. We're feeling it every time we hear a new news story, right? And it's daily. But the fact that we're talking about it is really, really important. To the other gentleman's question about what we can do to keep prevention. The best thing we can do is talk about it and not be afraid to talk about it. Not be afraid, maybe even more importantly, not be afraid to hear about it. It can be, when we're hearing about these stories day in and day out, it can be really tempting to just sort of want to shut it out and not think about it and not deal with it. But it's a really big problem. I mean, when you're talking about 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys, that's a real 20% of everybody. That's a really big, big problem. So we just need to keep talking about it, keep listening about it, and and then hopefully more of these stories will continue to come out, so that more of these people will continue to be brought to justice, and maybe in the future it won't look so bad.
And I just wanted to add, and keep going in your education so you can be the educator, and that you stop this from happening in our schools, in our universities. It's like Gregory said, it's rampant. After I heard the story of Utah State, it said, Gregory, go get all the faculty over there. Please, just do anything. We want to change the situation, especially in schools.
And if you know somebody that's been abused, don't hesitate. Support them right away and be there for them.
Oh, the small question, yeah.
Small question.
I will take the small question.
How's Melody's house coming? Was that the question? No.
So we're working
was about
on
the album. Yeah,
we're working on the album. Well, it's already been recorded, and we're really excited about this particular project because what we didn't talk about in the film was the fact that this is sort of a dream project of ours that we are in the process of releasing it in conjunction with a children's book. That sort of follows along with the part of what the music is doing, and we've recruited the talents of a New York Times bestselling children's book author, Liesl Shurtleff, who's fantastic, and we're talking with publishers right now. She wrote a beautifully simplistic story that just cuts to the core of a lot of what the film talks about. We're hoping for sometime next year. Keep an eye out.
Yes, so I think we have time for 2 more, so yes, go ahead.
So the music was great, the talent's fantastic, it's strong personalities, but the fashion was really good too. You're very fashionable people, and it was interesting to see that over time, fashionable, through the years. So was there any response from, maybe this is your first time watching it with a crowd or an audience, but was there a response that kind of surprised you? Like, I thought everybody laughed at a time when I didn't think it was funny, but is there something that came up for you that you thought that was rude that you laughed, or that was funny and you didn't, or something like that?
Yeah, I think the first time I watched it was at the premiere just a few weeks ago. Maybe it was longer than that, but on the East Coast, and I was so in the depths of despair that all of a sudden people started laughing when Ryan was left in the on stage at the sessions, and I was like, oh yeah, there is a bit of humor here, and you almost stop. You don't remember that, there's little lighthearted moments in the
All I
film.
have to do is just stand there, apparently, and that's it.
I mean, but it's the gift of Ben, and also the gift of the editor, and the job that they did in making such a rough, heavy subject have some lighthearted beauty there, and I think that's really important. And I was really appreciative of that. And I was appreciative to the audience that they recognized that.
Ben, you want to say something about editing? We talked a little bit about this.
Yeah, well, Amanda Larson was the editor on this, and
you had talked about it being important that a woman.
Oh yeah,
be involved.
absolutely. So when we started to embark on this project, it was, for me, I knew right away, like, I was gonna definitely hire a woman, ask a woman to edit this. There was no way I was gonna try to tell this story without a woman's perspective. And I was really lucky to have found Amanda. And, you know, there were times where I would think, you know, no, I don't think we should show that. And she'd say, no. She'd push back and say, no, I think this shows her strength, or what have you. Yeah, I think she even called Melody a badass.
Melody is a badass.
Yes. Marching around out there in the field, carrying lumber.
Building her house.
And I was like, enough already. And she was like, no, she looks like a badass.
I 100% agree, by the way. But in an attempt to better understand the statute of limitations advocacy, especially on a legislative side, I felt like, Melody, your little directed video was incredible and touching, and I think helped open up something that I wasn't really thinking much about beforehand. But could you help, not you necessarily specifically, Melody, but help understand a little bit on somebody who has been through abuse as a child? It seemed like a lot of that is piled on and almost hidden and almost forgotten in a lot of ways. And I think if I'm correct in that interpretation, that would help, I think, a lot of people understand why the statute of limitations extension is so vital and important as some of those things are unearthed and brought to life.
When we saw the vision that Melody had for that particular music video, at that point in our lives in particular, for even us as her siblings, it was very telling as to where she was, and for me, it was difficult at times because I think it's almost worse knowing that somebody you love has been hurt in a way than even yourself. And so to be able to kind of see her throwing herself into the music that way, I think was really, really powerful. And you're right. I once had an individual, after I had testified at the Utah State Capitol, come up to me and say, "But these things never affect you." And I thought, that's on me. If I have led people to believe that I don't have the effects of the things that I've lived through. I may be a little bit more private about it, but I face it every single day, and it's a process. And my husband can attest to it. There are good days and there are bad days, just like anybody who's lived through a traumatic event.
And why the statute is important is because I talk about that in the film, that I was in my master's program in school when it finally came back very, very strongly. And to think that, I'm well into my 20s before I can even grapple with it, before I even acknowledge that there's something in my mind that's off, is a problem. Because then after that, it takes years and years to get confident enough and to gain the support that you need to actually go out and admit that it happened and to tell people and to do a film. But it's so important because I've talked with people, friends. I'm not out there meeting with survivors day in and day out, but friends who have come to me confidentially, and they're dealing with it in their 50s, where they're finally able to just take this little portion of their brain and start purging it. And that's why this work that these guys are doing is so important, because there's no time scale. You can't deal with it when you're 16. You can't deal with it when you're 20. You're still dealing with it in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. It never goes away. And the only way for it to start to go away is to deal with it.
And I feel like, I feel like if we don't have the option to come forward, we're looking at 20 years of predators continuing to hurt our kids. if we don't have that opportunity to at least have the option to see if we have a case, let the system decide, but don't shut us off before we even get there. Let us name our abuser. And in talking with other abuse victims, the number one thing that I hear is if they were allowed to come forward and speak with law enforcement, if that's what they were allowed to do, they say it's less about the outcome of the case. Like that, it's almost very secondary. It's more about the fact that they were able to go through the process, they were heard, and the things that they've lived through were seen in such a way that they feel they can move forward from there.
And I was just going to add to that. This just happened last week. My wife worked with surviving abuse back a while ago, and a woman just reached out to her, and she's in her 50s, and saying that I really need somebody to talk to right now. And she said that it's difficult because nobody believes her story, what happened. Not even her family, and so she feels really alone. And it's saddening to see that happening. That we need a better support system out there for individuals, people that have been abused, not just sexually, but all abuse. And it's important to give them that support that they need. I know it can be difficult to understand how to give them the support that they need because you may overthink it, but just try to be there for them. Try to understand them, and that's my hope. And I hope that more awareness comes out about that.
Let me ask you. I want to ask you finally. I want to bring this back to the music. And what was going on with the Beethoven's Fifth thing? Like to me, and I'll tell you what. This is what I was talking to Ben about this. I thought this was so great in some ways because you guys had a mind meld for so long, and now you were disagreeing. And I thought and it's not to say you don't. I'm guessing you disagree all the time, but I wonder if going through this experience allowed you to stay together as a group, but also gave you the courage or the opportunity to go out on your own as well. You can still do the thing as the 5 Browns, but you also can express yourselves, not just in building a badass house, but in your music and in your creative lives as well. Would you talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it can be really easy for people on the outside looking in, at our group to just assume that we all think alike, that we all act alike, that we all are alike in every single way, right? Which is just clearly not true. We're our own people, which I think Ben was able to kind of capture pretty well. We're our own people who have our own opinions, and when we get together in rehearsal, we make those opinions known, right? But at the same time, there's something that's really different between being a solo musician versus being in a chamber group. They're both really rewarding, but there's something that goes on when you're in a group playing just this epic music on stage together and kind of going through that experience at once, right? Feeling the emotion at once in unity, even though we're these totally different people with different lives. We're all like in the moment, like living it together. And I feel like that's sort of how our relationships work, just sort of in general as well, right? Hopefully you could tell from the film, but we genuinely like each other. We're like actually best friends. We go to movies, we hang out, and like honestly, sometimes it can be hard to rehearse because we just want to talk the whole time and like catch up on everything. But yeah, the fact that we have this career, even though now that we live in various cities throughout the States, we're geographically separate. But we get this real gift to be able to see each other all the time and interact with each other and be a part of each other's lives. and stay best friends.
Well, let me just say, Ben Niles, congratulations. Thank you, 5 Browns, very much. Ladies and gentlemen, the 5 Browns.